I just got to tell you, 1,000% I would have gone for that 4th and 1.
Are you ready to get uncomfortable?
See, what had happened at first was...
Welcome to the first episode of...
See, what had happened at first was...
Well, it's Browns week, and you know what that means. We are about to get mighty uncomfortable up in here, and while I know it's a lot to ask, I implore you to stick around to see what went wrong in the big, empty ketchup bottle back on that fateful night in January. Steelers come into this one after losing 4 of their last 5, including to these very same Browns just a week earlier, albeit with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. While the Steelers certainly aren't hot, at least they've got big game experience on their side. Now, I'm appreciative of Pouncey's efforts over the years, but the first 2 seasons of this show have been riddled with awful snaps by number 53, and I won't say I'm glad he's moving on to the next life, but I also won't say I'm not. Something snowball effect.
That award as the pass is intercepted at the 50-yard line.
The worst gets worser, and somebody get Blake Bortles on the line because I've seen this game before. Football is a game of momentum and always will be. With 2 turnovers and a defensive touchdown given up in the first 4 minutes, the Steelers' offense is picked up where they left off in the final third of the season. Keep an eye on this and how many times it happens. Jarvis Landry comes in motion and a man whose name I can no longer recall gets absolutely roasted like the carrots in my Hello Fresh order, and it's time to take him out of the oven and send him to that other Ohio team.
Hand it to the fullback.
Some serious power football by the pathetic Steelers front on this one, and no, Derek Watt does not need more carries. He is a replacement for Tyler Matakevich, not a serious eligible. Defense? Who needs it? Kareem Hunt treats the defense like they were a visitor to his hotel room, and if you don't want to blink, you're going to need to cut those eyelids off because this one is already spiraling out of control. 48 minutes left though, plenty of time for the GOAT in the number 7 jersey, but you're gonna need to peep this pair of doozies before you get too excited. Juju and Deontay might be good receivers, but 7 feet tall they are not, and it is a second Roethlisberger interception just 12 minutes into this game. Just not good enough for a veteran quarterback at home in the playoffs. While tons of people point to the defensive performances in their last 2 playoff games against Jacksonville and Cleveland, and admittedly they too were awful, non-desperation interceptions by a 16-year quarterback at home in the playoffs is just not putting you in a high success scenario. Speaking of a high success scenario, Cleveland hits the mystified Steelers D with another shift, and the defense gets so perfectly and cleanly blocked that they might as well be a Browns or Seahawks fan in my mentions. Add, and after 1, it's 28-0 Cleveland Browns to the list of things I'd never thought I'd have to say, and we move into the second stanza. The only thing more behind than the Steelers is this awful pass to an open Abrontosaurus for a first, and on a gotta have it third, Roethlisberger has 0 shallow options and chucks that thing out of bounds because I'm assuming he assumed they would go for it on 4th down from the Cleveland 38. I too would have assumed that if I hadn't seen the particular brand of cowardice and lack of aggression that AFC North football can sometimes have on our beloved Mike T. There's just no way to justify this sequence, and it's the first of a few moments that I will mention as an insurmountable mistake. Because everyone's determined to prove me wrong, at least momentarily, the Browns go 3 and out on a nice coverage play by James Pierre. Unfortunately for mine and your sanity, the Steelers get into what seems to be their most dangerous position, which is 3rd and short, and this one gets tipped and floats helplessly into a defensive lineman's hands. If you're keeping track, that's 2 minutes gone since the punt, and the Browns now have the ball 10 yards further than they would have had they stopped the Steelers on 4th and 8. Much like my decisions after a third tequila, this thing is absolutely nosediving into a puddle of insecurity, tears, and a sense that this awful scenario has repeated itself.
Upstairs, wide open, Tommy Bohannon!
Browns, at the end of the day, aren't all that concerned with points and can't hang on to it, but if you're keeping track, it's now been 5 minutes of game time and the Steelers are 51 yards behind where they would have been when they cowardly punted. Because the old gunslinger's gonna sling, Ben takes them down the field in a slow, methodical drive that would have been perfect if they were up 28-0, but since they're not, it's not. A pair of runs from Connor converts and then gets it in, but again, 10.5 minutes have come off the clock since that cowardly punt in a game when the Browns find themselves up 28-0 and they will happily trade you 10 minutes for 7 points because there aren't enough possessions left to catch up at that rate. We talk often on 5-Star Radio, make sure you follow on Spotify or Apple, about Tomlin becoming something of a dinosaur among the NFL coaching ranks, as he's someone who probably shares more DNA with Marty Schottenheimer than he does Sean McVay, and to me this is an example of what I mean by that. The punt just put the Steelers a hair too far behind the 8 ball in terms of how many possessions would ultimately be left in this game. While I've been talking seemingly in an effort to piss me off even more, or at least make the second half of this thing easier to edit than the first, the Steelers let the Browns trot right down the field in just over a minute before the half, and this is officially the second insurmountable mistake for the Steelers. While I don't mean to imply that at 28-7 this was suddenly becoming a game, but considering how this thing plays out, it's at least plausible. 3 scores is a lot, but 4? In playoff football? Even if you scored on every possession, it's highly, highly unlikely to be overcome. While I guess you can't just call bad defense a mistake, I don't really care about semantics. This possession was a disaster, and if you ask me, it's time to call in the coroner for the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers.
I will remember you. Will you remember me?
As we enter the second half, I immediately change my mind and sit forward in my chair because I will remind you I have watched every minute of number 7's career, and no matter how many questions I might have about the 38 or 39-year-old version of Large Benjamin, he zips him down the field in an efficient drive topped with a great toss to the very friendly Abrontosaurus, and maybe, just maybe, the Steelers are really getting into this thing. Take note, though, that the Steelers go for and miss the 2, 35-16. And perhaps the best sequence of events for the Steelers on the day, they get Cleveland right off the field and the ball comes right back to a now cooking Benjamin. A few big chunk plays to all of his favorite targets, and Seven's got him right down the field in a hurry, and holy shit, despite everything we have seen, this is still about to become a game. 4th and goal gets hairy, but Ben always knows where his number 1 possession guy is, and that's number 19, who pulls this in for the tremendously well-needed score. And don't look now, but there's still 18 minutes left in this sumbitch. Also, I hate to do this to you, but imagine if the vaunted Steelers D got a stop before the half. This score could easily be 28-24. There just aren't enough possessions in football to waste any, Mike. Browns politely get right off the field, and it's back to Benjamin and the boys, and...
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Mike T chooses another cowardly punt with all of the momentum on his side, and you might as well take this goose out of the oven because it's dinner time and we are feasting on the flesh of the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers. They died as they lived, in spectacularly surprising fashion. Whether it was the unprecedented in franchise history 11-0 start, or the sudden and shocking downfall in the last 5 games and playoffs, the 2020 Steelers were nothing if not surprising. I recall at points last year arguing with people on social media who were saying some of the wins weren't good enough, and that there were cracks showing. I disagreed in the moment because I've watched a lot of football in my time, and I know that whether it's luck, bad opponents, whatever you want to point to as an argument for why you didn't think the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers were any good, it's still an accomplishment in itself to win 11 games in a row, especially with a quarterback coming off a major surgery. Look, was I happy with the end of the season? Not by a long shot. I was highly disappointed with it, and this has sadly become a theme to December and January for me as a Steelers fan. Besides disappointing playoff losses, this team has absolutely crumbled in December 3 years in a row, and there comes a time when you have to ask yourself globally what the problems are. In their last 2 playoff games, the Steelers have scored an astounding 79 points, but have given up an even more astounding 93 points, both in games at home. Sure, everything comes down to players executing, but I also think it comes down to coaches putting those guys in positions to succeed. Why is it now that it's been years that we've been watching simple motions lead to matchups like Keenan Allen on LJ Fort or Robert Spillane on Jarvis Landry? Even if we put all this aside, there are 2 or 3 moments in this game that are just straight bad decisions. The punt from the Cleveland 38 when they were already down 28. The soft defense after finally getting into the game and giving up a touchdown in less than a minute. And finally, the beautifully crisp butterleaf lettuce atop the shit sandwich, which was the obscenely cowardly 4th and 1 punt with the chance to make it a 5-point game. Turnovers happen. Touchdowns happen. Decisions, and as a result, your fate, are in your control. And this weekend in Cleveland, these two teams meet with a chance to affect their fates once again. Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns. See you Monday. Here we go. If you're still here, share this on your social if you don't mind. Our season is obviously short, so anything you can do to help get the word out there is greatly appreciated as we hope to careen towards 10,000 subs this season.